The Buick Grand National timeline just got a little more interesting. Apparently, there was a Regal GNX released in the year 2000.
Then there's Buick experimenting with a performance future based on the high performance of the past. The awesome GNX from the 80s and the GSX from the late 60s with the biggest of the big blocks. Now meet the new Regal GNX.
Before the Grand National was the Buick Century Turbo Coupe. Very bizarre, short-lived cars that not many people know about. In 1986, there was a LeSabre Grand National that, again, not many know about. But there was one more Grand National introduced in 2000 that has gone completely under the radar. The all-new Century and Regal were released to the public in 1997. They were on GM's revised W platform along with the Intrigue, Grand Prix Monte Carlo, and Impala. The differences between the Regal and Century: the Regal offered bigger engines and more options, to put it simple. Up until this point, the Regal always came in a coupe configuration, but from this point on, never again. It's not like GM couldn't, because the Monte Carlo was a two-door, but coupe sales fell short for the prior generation, and so they cut it off. These 4th-gen Regals seem pretty bland. They look underpowered. They look like they were meant for people over the age of 50. However, that's not the case for all trim options for the Regal. It's the case for base models, but other Regals packed a punch. Buick Regal GS models came with the Series 2 3800, one of GM's best engines, and was supercharged. For 1997, they made 240 horsepower and 280 foot-pounds of torque. That's more power than Ford's V8 SHO of the time, 0 to 60 in around 6.7 seconds. One of the disadvantages, if you will, with these is that they're front-wheel drive. But GS model's powertrain control module activates torque management to reduce wheel spin at launch, so that is definitely a nice improvement. They came with traction control, power rack and pinion steering, anti-lock brakes, magnetic variable effort steering, and some subtle cosmetic changes. These are unique cars of their own. I mean, GM slapped this 38 supercharged engine in a lot of models. I think the 98 is one of them, and that's probably the most underrated. But this isn't the GNX that was mentioned at the beginning. Now, before I get into the details, this was a concept and was never mass produced. So if you want to click off the video, be my guest. I know some people aren't a fan of concepts, but that doesn't mean these aren't interesting, because they are. I mean, it had triple exhaust on a Buick. Also, a few years later, there was the Regal GSX that was available to the public, and those are very impressive. And so while the GNX was a concept, the GSX wasn't. As we know, the Regal Grand National's ultimate version was the GNX, or Grand National Experimental. Only 547 were made and are insanely collectible to this day. The average sale price is over $170,000. Fast forward to the year 2000 and the GNX name was brought back, sort of. The tuner scene was gaining more and more attention. The Fast and Furious franchise was still a year away from its debut, but even then, tuners were gaining momentum. With this hype, Buick of course wanted to get in on the action, reach that younger demographic, and so this project was given to GM's special vehicle team. Mind you, this was the same group that created the 1992 Impala SS concept, which did in fact go into production. Except the concept models made over 500 horsepower, and the production models made 260. Taking a look at this all-new GNX, we can see the drastic cosmetic changes that have been done. There are these aggressive ground effects, 18-inch HRE wheels. If you don't know, HRE is very credible. Lots of Porsche owners have them. A rear spoiler, triple exhaust, functional hood scoop, fog lights, and a two-tone paint job. Notice the portholes on the hood there, kind of a tribute to the original GNX and sort of a Buick trademark, if you will. I don't think it looks half bad. It certainly does reflect the time era perfectly, but I totally understand if you aren't a fan of the looks. It's not for everyone, that's for sure. I'm not the biggest fan of that triple exhaust. The GSX, which I'll get to later, had a dual exhaust system that looks far better, in my opinion. So it looks the part, but does it have the performance to back it up? Under the hood is the same engine from the Regal GS, that supercharged 3800, but improvements were made. They added an intercooler, custom cold air intake, upgraded headers, and a free-flowing exhaust paired to Borla mufflers. Power went up from 240 horsepower to 300, which is a 20% increase, and torque output went up from 280 to 300. Additionally, brakes, rotors, and calipers were of course upgraded, and the ride height was lowered by 1.5 inches for improved handling. So to answer the question of whether these had the performance to back them up, I'd say yes. The original GNX made 276 horsepower but 360 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds. I don't think this concept would come close to beating that. If I had to guess with that 20% power increase, it'd probably shave off maybe a second. The GS's 0 to 60 was tested at 6.7 seconds, so I'd say roughly 5.7 seconds to 60, which is still very impressive for the time. The Buick GNX made its debut at the 2000 SEMA show held in Las Vegas. It's unclear the kind of reaction it received from the public at this show. Obviously it wasn't good because only one was ever made. In 2009, this car was auctioned at Barrett-Jackson. I'm unsure how many miles it had when it was auctioned off, but it sold for $19,250. $19,250 in 2009 translates to just less than $29,000 in 2024. Whoever won this car not only got a one-of-one special model, but one of the fastest Buicks ever made. Some people aren't fans of concept cars because, well, they were never released to the public. The Buick GSX, on the other hand, was. Now, if you're older, you probably remember the GSX. They were introduced in the early 70s and were absolute beasts. We're talking over 500 pound-feet of torque. Fast forward 30-some years and the GSX, or Grand Sport Extra nameplate, was back. In 2003 and 2004, Buick partnered up with Street Legal Performance, or SLP. This wasn't GM's first time collaborating with them. There was the Pontiac Firehawk and some Grand Prix with SLP upgrades. For both GS and LS models, there were 3 different packages to pick from. Before I get into them, these were dealer-installed options and dealer-supplied accessories. So technically these wouldn't be factory models to the best of my knowledge, but they were still available to the public. Stage 1 came with 15 extra horsepower, catback dual exhaust, cold air induction system, and rear fascia or fascia inserts. Stage 2 adds 20 extra horsepower, 180-degree thermostat, and a Hypertech power programmer with SLP custom calibration. Stage 3 adds 30 extra horsepower and a 3.5-inch smaller diameter pulley that speeds up the supercharger for more boost. Customers could also add in the handling and lowering package along with performance tires. Cosmetically, they added a mesh grille, unique chrome wheels, a splitter, a spoiler, 2-tone paint just like the GNX concept, and chrome badging. Interestingly, they put some emblems on the taillights rather than the body. I can't think of any car that has something like this, but the Buick GSX has it. As for the sound for the GSX, they don't sound anything like how they once were, but they weren't half bad. Some might think it's a little high-pitched, then again it's a V6 and not a V8. Compared to the GNX concept, these look more subtle and less tuner-like. Personally, I think they look better. I'm sure most of us can agree on that. Although they did make 30 fewer ponies than the concept, they made 12 more pound-feet of torque. Stage 3 models made 270 horsepower and 312 pound-feet of torque. I'm not entirely sure what the 0 to 60 is on one of these, but if I had to guess, maybe 6 seconds flat. There's not really much info out there about these. I have no idea how many were produced for each stage package or the total production numbers. I'm also not sure of the cost for each package. I will say though, I think these are really cool cars. I had no idea that these existed and probably won't ever see one out in the wild. And there you have it, the early 2000s Buick GNX. This video was fun to make just because I was able to talk about the GS, which was supercharged, the GNX concept, along with the GSX with SLP upgrades. I've never come across a GSX at a car show or while driving. It's been a while since I've even seen a Regal GS. Also, if you've had or owned that 3800 supercharged engine, let us know how much horsepower you're making because I'm pretty sure you can boost those and make a good amount of horsepower. That is going to wrap it up for this week's video. The reason for the lack of a video last week was due to Hurricane Milton. I announced this in the community tab, so in the future, if you want to vote in polls, be up to date, or see sneak peeks for future videos, be sure to check that out. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. I hope everyone affected by the hurricane is doing their best, and I will try to see you all next week.